Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Views expressed by participants are personal. Planning and transacting media used to be a straightforward process. You hired an agency and benefited from their collective buying power, vendor relationships, and knowledge. But in an age of data, disruption, and a slew of new platforms, many marketers are rethinking this formula. One option involves finding new and innovative ways of working closer with your agency partners. But in some cases, this might mean taking certain responsibilities in-house. These are some of the things that today's guest, Gah-Yee Won, has been tasked with navigating. Gah-Yee is the Director of Account Management, Agency Operations, and Marketing Channel Strategy at Scotiabank, one of Canada's largest financial institutions. A Toronto native, storytelling was a big passion of hers growing up, and was one that she fostered through drama and visual art while in high school. That passion would continue into her university studies, where she was originally working towards a career in journalism, but an opportunity to break into advertising through a friend of a friend would change all of that. One of the OGs of the Canadian digital media space, Gah-Yee jumped into agency life at a time when traditional media was still king, and digital advertising was more of an afterthought. From trafficking ads to starting one of the first transparent agency trading desks in Canada, to working with the mother of all global advertisers, Procter & Gamble, Gah-Yee's career reads like an unofficial history of digital media planning and buying. We sit down with Gah-Yee Won and chat about everything from being a French immersion student, growing up in a multi-generational home, and managing a portfolio of clients that ranged from the Toronto Zoo to Procter & Gamble. And for those looking to grow their careers, Gah-Yee also provides some sound and straightforward advice on how to position yourself for a promotion.
Scotiabank is one of the largest banks in Canada. We're one of the big five FIs. My team is basically threefold. First off, I need to give a shout out to my team because they told me if I didn't, they'd be very upset at me. So I'm going to say, hey team, how's it going? Thanks for being awesome. So my team basically has threefold. So there's the account management side, and think of that as the in-house creative agency. They need an account management team to help them project management and also manage the account with our in-house clients. So I just took that over recently. Super excited about it because my bread and butter when I was on the agency side was, account management and working with clients. So that's right up my wheelhouse. And then we have the agency operations, which is working with our media agency and creative agency, so PhD and Rethink, on how we make sure that the relationship is working well. So maybe a little bit of relationship therapy, as well as, those operational things like invoicing and making sure that, the retainers being used. So those really sexy things. And then the third piece and the thing that's really near and dear to my heart is marketing channel strategy. And that's not my favorite child. So it's just that it's the thing that I've been doing for a longer time. It's marketing channel strategy, which encompasses both paid media, which that's, where I came from, as well as our owned channels like merchandising. So in-branch posters, digital screens, ABM screens, things that I've always thought, like, how cool would it be to see how the strategy works around that, and never really had any exposure to on the agency side, but something that I'm getting a lot of exposure to on the client side. So that's been really cool to get involved with as well.
I want to go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
I was born in Toronto. I haven't gone very far. I'm still here. I did a little bit of moving around when I was younger. So I lived in downtown Toronto in Little Chinatown, the east side of the city. And when I was about 12, my family moved to Richmond Hill, suburbia. Like, we went from urban, multi-generational home to a massive suburban house with just houses upon houses next to it. And so it was a really interesting difference for me because my life was changed a lot in that way. And it's funny now, I'm in my late 30s, and this is actually the second address I've had in on the street that we live on, because I grew up on this street, and I moved back here the second I got the opportunity to. So a year ago, we moved back to this street, and I love it here. I love it. I'm an East End girl all the way.
So wait a minute, the house that you're currently living in right now, it's safe to say that you probably passed by it multiple number of times growing up when you lived in that neighborhood previously.
Oh my gosh, yes. And you know what's funny? When I when we when we came to look at this house, I looked across the street and I was like, there's this convenience store that has been there since before I moved, like before we left. So it was kind of funny. And I'm a little bit saddened now because of the pandemic. The convenience store closed. So, but it was kind of crazy. I was like, wow, that convenience store's been there a real long time, because I haven't lived on this street for almost 20 years. Crazy.
Oh, damn, it just goes to show you how crazy things have been if a convenience store is going to get done in by the pandemic. Because I think those were still essential services because they sold food.
Yeah, they were totally open. The laundromat, or sorry, the dry cleaner next door is still open, but I couldn't believe it. The shop, for those of you who lived in the East and lived, around the Broadview area, the Shop and Bag, it was called, closed, which is a little bit sad for me. So, but yeah, it's awesome moving back into the neighborhood, and seeing how it's totally been revitalized from, when I was a kid, it was not the best area in town, and now it's very much up and coming, and lots of young families around here. So I love it. I love being here, and I love living in the city.
So tell us a little bit more about what life was like growing up in Toronto and suburbia.
In Toronto, I feel like it's really multicultural, and there's tons of diversity. And as a kid, I grew up. I went to a French immersion school down here, and I love it. And don't ask me to speak French with you, because my French is not awesome. It's
Okay.
not I'm technically fluent in French, but technically is the word here. But yeah, I went to French immersion, and so I went to school with a lot of different kids, and I never knew that there was anything different, about being the child of an immigrant family. And that was never a thing. And then I went to suburbia, and I hate to say it, but very few people looked like me. And I mean, I loved it there, and I had great friends. But the thing that it really stuck with me is that there were there weren't as many people who looked like me, who didn't have as many diverse backgrounds. Like when I was growing up, when I was young, living downtown Toronto, I had friends who had two dads, who had a mom and a dad who weren't together. And that wasn't the case in suburbia. And I think that really stuck with me. I realized that there are people who are, different, and that was okay. But in suburbia, it was one of those things where it was a little bit different there. And that stuck with me, and it was hard, right? And I faced more discrimination in suburbia. I hate to say it. So I've always wanted to come back to the city and move back to the city. So really, when I could, and when I moved out of my parents' house, I came back to the city.
Question for you about French immersion. Did anyone else in your family speak French? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of French immersion is that all of your classes are in French, which means your homework is in French, which means unless someone was speaking French at home, you might have been on your own a little bit.
So I'm going to tell you something else. So no, nobody in my family spoke French too. So that was one problem. But my mother is a teacher. So I had like no help from the one person who could help me with all of my homework. Yeah, all of my homework is in French. And my mother is, she's a wonderful teacher. She's a principal now. But I just couldn't, I had no help at home. So it really taught me how to be good at being, doing things and getting them done on my own, not getting any help. It's true. And this is the thing, my younger brother speaks French. He went to French immersion too. And I could help him, but I never had any help on my own. So
You were trailblazing.
I was
Were
I
you the
was a
oldest?
trailblazer.
Were you the oldest in the family? Or the oldest
I
child?
am.
Yeah, I am
I
too.
am.
We're the ones that either trailblaze or we make the mistakes. And then they learn
Right?
from that for the other one. I know. We've got the burns for that, don't we?
It's so true. Why is it so much easier for our younger siblings? If my brother listens to this, he's totally going to disagree, and he's going to be like, "That's not true. I had to blaze my own trail." But you know, he had help along the way. He just didn't know it.
You mentioned that coming from an immigrant family, success was closely tied to education. How much emphasis did they put on that growing up?
Oh gosh, education was so important to my family, and it was really the means to to get to a place in life where you felt like you were successful. My parents came to Canada for education, and so for them, for myself and my brother, it was really important that we got an education. And actually, you know, we we were pushed to make sure that we got good grades, but in the end, I think it really taught me how to how to really focus and make sure that I'm successful and be ambitious because gosh, you got to be at the top of your class. And that was the only thing you could do. That was the only acceptable outcome of any test, any exam, any project. Whatever you did, they didn't care what I did. I didn't have to go to math or science or whatever, but I had to do well in whatever I was doing. And so it was a huge driver of success. And it still is. It's taught me how to push for success and make things happen. So, you know, when I was a kid, I was very resentful of it. But now that I'm an adult, I feel like it's really taught me, a good life skill.
I wouldn't say I came from an immediate immigrant family, although I'm second generation Canadian on my mom's side of the family and third generation on my dad's side. But I definitely saw that through my grandparents and some of my aunts and my uncles. And let me ask you this question. I want to see if there are parallels between my family and your family. I found that even when I talked to my peers, if you had strong immigrant influences in your life, they basically mapped out your life this way and said, go to university and you have three choices: doctor, lawyer, or accountant. Did you hear that too growing up?
I never got the doctor, lawyer, or accountant. I was very much allowed to, you know, figure out what I wanted to do. But I also kind of wanted to be a lawyer. So I think they always just felt like, you
Ah,
know what, she's probably going to be a lawyer. It'll be fine. And, I ended up okay. I've done okay, but I am not the most successful person in my family. Actually, my brother is a doctor, but he has his PhD. So he's one of those doctors. He's not a medical doctor.
doctor of philosophy.
Yeah, well, he works in bio engineer,
Oh, geez, okay.
biomechanics or something. I can't even say. I don't even know. He's just very smart. And let me ask you what do you think he ended up doing? What's he doing right now?
Uh, is he in media?
He's in advertising too. It's awesome. He's in a totally different. He's in medical advertising for pharmaceuticals, but it's just funny because he can't really get away from me. He works with people who know me, so it's kind of funny. He went and did his doctorate, and I can't tell you how proud I am of him. But it's funny that he ended up in marketing too. So
It's funny. I laughed a little bit when you brought up the PhD, and not because I find it funny, because it reminded me of something one of my professors had said to me years ago in university, where you refer them as doctor wherever, and one of them was finally like, "Look, just don't call me doctor." He's like, "If I say it enough, people start to think I'm a medical doctor."
yeah, yeah, no, he's not a medical doctor, but he is kind of related in the healthcare field. So sometimes we do talk to him about medical related things. He did his PhD in ocular biology. So sometimes we talk to him about our eyes, and we ask him why he hasn't figured out how to get rid of all of our glasses yet, because everybody in our family wears glasses. So
Is like, if you got that PhD, you got to solve this problem for the family, and don't say contacts.
exactly, that's exactly it. So no, but he's doing so well for himself, and I'm so happy that he's blazing his own trail in advertising.
You refer to yourself as being an artsy kid growing up. What made you gravitate towards art?
I mean, I was always kind of doodling and drawing, but the thing that I really loved was actually drama. And for those of you who know me, I'm one very dramatic. I, I have trouble hiding how I'm feeling. I'm like one of those wear your, heart on your sleeves kind of people. But I'm also extremely bossy. I've been told I'm bossy. I accept the moniker, and and that's why I was really good at being a director in school. So I actually I took to theater really very well. And it was because I knew how to tell people what to do, and it was great. And they did it. And I was like, hey, I can get people to do things and react to things, and I can coach them on how to, be. And so I really did well in theater. And it's probably one of my regrets not continuing to do that in my life. But I still try to like draw, I paint, and I love it. It's right now, especially during COVID, having that kind of artistic outlet has been really helpful.
Did you have any influences or anyone that you looked up to growing up?
Yeah, I was really lucky to have some extremely, extremely wonderful women in my life and in my family. They're passionate, they're strong, they're hardworking. They've taught me, my grandmother's taught me. I have two grandmothers, they're still living. Both of them got their COVID vaccines this weekend. So I'm so excited about that because they're in their 80s. But they taught me how to take care of a family and how to care about people and how to be a loving, individual and take care of people. And then I had my mom, who I talked about earlier. She's the principal at a high school now, which is pretty big. Like, she's done really well for her career. And she worked my whole life. And that really had a huge impact on me and teaching me to be ambitious and work hard. She's the one that I really, have learned so much about balancing work and life and making sure that, she was there for our family, although she didn't help me with my homework. Um, but, being able to balance these two things, she was one of those role models that, taught me how to have that balance in my life. And then there's my aunts. There were five of us all together. My aunts are not that much older than I am. Like, most people have aunts that are like, really a lot older. I basically grew up with my aunts, and I mentioned we lived in a multi-generational home, and that's because we lived with my aunts, and they all when I was little, they would dress me up like a little doll and parade me around. But when I got to be like, well, I was like the perfect, like they were, 12 to like 20. And so some of them, they would just dress me up and parade me around, and it was terrible because I had this horrible hair that would stick straight anyways. And they would always try to fix it. But my aunts really, they took care of me when I was young. And when I got older, we became almost like sisters, and they're still kind of like sisters because I don't have any sisters. I have a brother. And they really taught me how to have a voice because, gosh, when you got five of us in a room, it was very loud. And if you didn't learn how to talk over someone, you were just quiet for your whole life. And you would also never get to eat anything because, people would just take all the good food, and you would really no food and no voice. And so I had to learn real quick to eat everything that you could get your hands on as soon as you could. And, how to have a strong, assertive voice. I learned from my aunt. So I'm grateful for that.
What was your very first job?
Oh gosh, I started working when I was young, when I was probably around 13. My dad owned, we'll call it a string of mature ladies clothing stores called Cottage Cove. I don't know if any of you guys remember that brand, but they had a location in Hillcrest Mall, which was close to our home in Richmond Hill. And I worked there for a couple of years. I remember wearing the best, and I mean by best, probably the ugliest sweaters ever. Like, the sweaters with like the lake scenes on them with the, foliage everywhere. And I was 13 at the time. So they were like the most not cool things ever. But I worked there, and I learned customer service working, in a store where I had to help people figure out what to wear and tell them it looks good, even though it was not, it was not cool. And then when I turned 16, I got a job at Shoppers Drug Mart, which was across the hall from the Cottage Cove, and I left the store, and then I had to wear another ugly uniform, but at least it was not ugly sweaters. So yeah, I worked at Shoppers for a while too after that.
Apart from customer service, what else did you learn from your time working retail?
I learned how to count money, and I also learned how to manage people. I got put into a managerial supervisor role pretty quickly when I went to Shoppers. And by the time, so I was 16 when I started there, and by the time I was 18, um, a year away from graduating high school, I was promoted to cash supervisor, and I had to like manage people. And that was really the first time I'd have ever had to manage people. But I think my my theater directing gigs in high school really helped with that, because I was getting pretty good at telling people what to do and convincing them that it was a good idea to do it. So it really helped with that. It was a good life lesson there.
Okay, so from there, you chose to attend the University of Western Ontario and you studied media, information, and technoculture. Do we call it the University of Western Ontario, or do you call it Western University? Because it's not the same name as it was when you graduated.
Oh gosh, I don't even know that. University of Western Ontario is what I called it.
You,
UWO for short.
you didn't realize they changed their name?
No,
Oh,
I
I'm
had no
serious.
idea.
Check it out. The reason I know about it was years ago. I want to say it happened about 8 or 9 years ago, and it happened on Twitter. And it was all trending, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Why is a university trending? Because sometimes when you're trending on Twitter, it's for the wrong reasons. And it was about a name change, and it was just so many angry fourth-year students who were like, I'm a month and a half away from graduating, 2 months away from graduating, and they changed the name of the school on us because it happened like midway through a second semester, I believe it was.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay, so full transparency, I've never been back for a homecoming, and probably people will be mad at me for doing that, but I have not been back. I haven't even been back to London since I left my last year.
So why the UWO and why study media, information, and technoculture?
So I'm going to give you the reason I gave my parents first, and then I'll tell you the other one after, okay? So the reason why I went into the program was because I was really interested in culture and journalism and technology and how all of those things work together. The program was very much journalistic and alternative. Like, it was really alternative-y. I don't know if that's the right word, but I found that really cool. And there was a lot of journalism classes. There was a lot of like cultural anthropology classes and those kind of things. So I was really into that kind of um, understanding of culture. And so that was the perfect course for me. Now, if you want the real reason I went into it, was because in my last year of high school, I really wanted to get amazing grades, as we talked about before. I really wanted to get the highest grades I could. So I decided not to take math because math and I were not friends.
I
So
concur with that.
yeah, which is funny because in the media world we do so much math, but math
But
and
we
I
do
didn't get
practical
along.
math, though. Come on.
Exactly. Yes, yes. Okay, true. We do practical math. But I was like, I don't like math and I can't do it. And I already didn't like science, and I didn't get along either. So there was no science and there was no math in my final year. And I graduated high school with an 87 average overall, right? So for those of you who are keeping track, that's magna cum laude. I graduated pretty top, pretty high up there, because I did all, and I got really high marks in English, drama, French, still had to take French, but I got really high marks in those classes that were very subjective. And so I graduated with an 87, and I was like, yes, I got a really high, I graduated with a really high grade. What the heck am I going to get into now? Because now everything needed math. So MIT, as we called it, media innovation and technoculture, is one of the only classes, or one of the only was one of the only majors that you could take that didn't have a math prerequisite, nor did I have to take any math in the classes. So it might have been a little short-sighted, but it turned out okay. I loved it. I did really well. And I made amazing friends. I met some amazing people there. So it actually turned out okay. But it was definitely one of those things where I was like, maybe it was a little short-sighted, but it turned out.
And after graduation, you didn't jump right into, I guess we could say, the full-time professional working world with your degree in hand. You went back to Shoppers Drug Mart. Why did you choose to do that after graduation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was a choice as much as it was I got nothing else to do. They're offering me a manager position. Let's go do that until I find something. And for the first time in my life, I was not super ambitious, and I didn't find a job for 3 years. And actually, I didn't know what I was gonna do. Because when I graduated, I was like, I'm never going into advertising. It's the devil. That's the thing that you learn in this program. It's like you have to be a journalist, and you have to be, and advertising is, the antithesis of what you should be doing. But I didn't follow that path. I didn't go into journalism, and I was really lost. I mean, I love, the people I worked with at Shoppers, and they treated me very well. I mean, I'd been there for, gosh, almost 10 years, but I went back there.
You said something really funny about how in your program at UWO, they taught you to be, to dislike advertising, to be skeptical of it. I studied communications at Brock University, and it was the exact same thing as well. Now that you're on the other side in advertising, don't you just want to go back to your professors and be like, we made this ad, and that person's wearing, I don't know, a blue dress because that's all they had in wardrobe. It has no other visual resonance whatsoever.
No, exactly.
We shot on this day because it was cheaper.
You know what, the thing that we held as our be all end all was Adbusters. Do you remember that magazine?
Yes, I do remember Adbusters. Oh God, that's a name I have not heard in a while.
Yeah, that was the thing. And so that's like, I held that as my, the thing that I held up very high. And so, Adbusters, that's why ads were bad, because, the advertising industry, well, I mean, look at us now, right?
We're not the big bad advertising industry, but
No.
we want to say to our professors that this industry isn't as deep as you thought it was. There aren't all these hidden meanings. Sometimes it's just, it is what it is, what you're looking at.
Yeah. I remember like looking at, textbooks where they're like, look, there's a shape that makes and points towards that. And, and you know what? We don't think about that, honestly. We just want to get the ad out the door.
And we want it out the door. We want it finished on time. We want everyone happy, and we want it trafficked in a timely fashion.
Oh, I wish that was so easy. It sounds so easy when you say it.
Yeah, no, no, it's not. But you did find yourself after in the media industry. How did you land at Zenith Optimedia? And what was your first role there?
Well, I loved my time at Zenith, first of all. And I will say the way I ended up there was very haphazardly. My very good friend and college roommate or university roommate, Michelle's fiance at the time, now her husband, is Danny Shankman. I don't know, many of you probably know him. And if you don't know him, if you saw his picture, you'd remember him. He's the really tall 6'8" guy. He was at Zenith already, and he was like, "You got to come here. Come talk to my director. There's a role. It's a junior entry level role. You'll be great for it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." I'm 26 now and have no direction in my life, so my parents are kind of like, time to get out of the house. Like, great, you're doing a retail job, but you got to go. So I went and did this interview with his director, and she was like, "I love you. Come work for us." And I was like, "Sure." I had no idea. Like, when I say no idea, I mean, when I started my job, I didn't even know what I was doing. So I was traffic coordinator, actually. And what that entails is taking the digital assets, like, the big boxes and the skyscrapers, and taking those assets and making traffic sheets and giving them to the publishers, and taking our client assets, giving them to the publishers. And that was my job. I had no idea what a big box was. My first day, I was like, "So what is this?" And they had to explain everything to me. I really had no idea, but they took a chance on me because, they were like, "Oh, you seem like, you seem like a good person, and, you're not like a total dud and you could talk to people. We'll just here. And so they took a chance on me, and I loved it. I mean, no one had ever been in that role before. And so there was no rules, there was no process. It was the Wild West, and I got to make it the way I wanted it. And that's kind of how I made a lot of that's how my career has really shaped up, right? Is just starting new roles and finding my way that way.
You had a series of promotions, though, during your time at Zenith. From coordinator, you moved into account executive. What was the difference between that role and the previous one?
Well, coordinator was very much like a traffic role, and very technical, even though I had no idea, when I started. The account executive role became more client facing and more of a planner role. And so very quickly, they started putting me in front of clients and getting me to present because, if you can't tell, I'm loud and I'm, quite animated. And so I always did well in front of clients. I always loved presenting. And so I did a lot of that in that role and I loved it. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to go and talk to like some of the coolest brands on earth and got to talk to them about their digital advertising when like I won't say it was in the nascent stage, but like people were just starting to do digital en masse. And so, I was always looked at as the cool person in the room because she knows how to talk about digital.
From there, you became the director of digital activation. Tell us a little bit more about the new responsibilities you inherited there. And is it safe to say that the biggest shift from you was moving from a player to a coaching role?
Yeah, definitely. So I went from, we'll say, kind of an AE role to a director role because I was filling that void again, right? So we didn't have a digital buying team at the time. The planners were just buying digital off the side of their desk. Could you imagine? Digital, was less than 10% of any media buy. And now digital is probably the majority of most media buys. And so it's just funny because back then it was like, okay, we need to start thinking about how to set up a process and make a bit more of a cohesive team to put this all together. And so I was given the mandate of build a team to buy digital. And this was before programmatic, right? So everything was still, do you remember when we signed things by IO and then we had to fax it back? I remember faxing you things, Victor.
Yep, I remember that very much. Okay, I'm going to tell you something right now. When I moved from television, doing 4 years of TV coordinating and TV sales into digital, I think you were my first client. You were working on the Toronto Zoo, and I
Oh
was, and
God.
I was at Astral Digital selling family.ca.
I love the Toronto Zoo. They still have such a special place in my heart. I love that place, and they're a great client, and they were a pro bono client too. But I would do anything for them. I really did. I remember us working together, Victor, and that was so long ago. Let's not tell people how long ago that was.
That was last week, right? Not that long ago. But I
Yeah,
do remember we had
yeah.
to fax stuff back to each other. Yeah, that was
Yep.
back in the day. And then I guess on my end, we finally got a scanner built into the printer. So I was able to do that properly. And now
Oh
I'm still
man.
trying to source DocuSign.
Oh gosh, that's too funny. I remember we had an intern once who his only role was to fax the signed contracts. And we found out after he left, he didn't correctly fax anything, and none of the contracts ever made it to where they were supposed to go.
Oh God. Poor guy's just sitting there running stuff through a machine and it's going into the
Yeah.
endless void of wherever.
Beeps. Yep. So,
Wouldn't it be
so
awesome
yeah.
if it ended up at one other specific fax machine like halfway around the world and this person's like, what is Zenith and why do I keep getting these things?
Totally. I only hope that that's where they were going and not, God knows where. But yeah, it was a lot of there was a lot of faxing involved in those early days. But we got through it. By the time I was done there, I think we had moved to you scan it and then it emails it to you and then you had a scanned copy of it, but there was still scanning.
There was still scanning involved. But your
Mhm.
time at Zenith, towards the tail end of your tenure there, you were involved with opening their first agency trading desk, which must have been, I mean, that must have been something really, really great to work on. Might have even been a hard sell internally because trying to convince people about, buying media this way, you're buying it out on an open exchange, you're not going to know the sites you're running on all the time, but you're going to get it for significantly less, and then convincing clients to kind of buy into that. Talk us a little bit about what it was like getting a trading desk set up for the very first time, because you talked to us about how digital was run when you first landed there and it was kind of bundled with like traditional media. This is kind of arguably one of the first times where the agency is kind of breaking away and saying, no, this is a dedicated digital product and service we offer. It's not tied to any legacy media.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was so it was the time when everyone started talking about, let's start a trade desk in our age. All the agencies were kind of doing it, dipping their toes, bringing in the guys from the US or the people from the US to run it. And I had a conversation with my then boss, one of my mentors and one of the best people I've ever worked with, Veronica Holmes. Um, and I said to her, and we talked about the fact that it was all of these solutions were non-transparent, and we needed something that was transparent, because if we really were servicing our clients the way that clients wanted to be serviced, I don't think that they want this non-transparent model. And so I embarked on this, and this is right at the time I was leaving too, so I never saw it through to fruition. But we were trying to set up a transparent trade desk at an agency when everyone else was not doing that. And I think that was a brave move. And I think it's, what a lot of clients are asking for now, if they're not already taking it in-house, because they need that transparency. So, I thought it was a very different model. And I think it was building it from scratch versus bringing up, something that was canned from the US and just, lifting and shifting it. And so it was a really different model. And I was proud of it, even though, I never saw it to the fruition.
Tell us what brought you to MediaCom and the digital account director role that you started in. Did you find the role or did the role find you?
I've never found a role on my own in my entire career. I've always had someone pull me in. And so this time it was actually a headhunter or an HR person from MediaCom. And they came and they said, listen, our account director is going on maternity leave, but we want you to come and work with us full time. We don't want you to come on contract, because this is P&G. They're the biggest client out there. And so we need someone who knows what they're doing, and we need someone who's committed to it. And so, I made that really difficult decision to leave, even though, I was in the middle of building this thing. And I had this history of, like, I grew up at Zenith, and I was surrounded by really inspirational people, women, Sunny Boot and Veronica Holmes. Sunny is one of the legends of the industry, and I got to work with her. But I also felt like I needed to go and spread my wings. And it's really hard to say no to P&G, to the biggest advertiser, to the exposure it gives you, and the fact that you get to work with so many different people. It was such a draw, and I loved it. I love the clients. Whenever I see them still, it's still big hugs, everyone, and how's it going? My good friends work on that account now. And so, it is, P&G was the draw, it's the big client that everyone wants to work on.
And it's not just the fact that they are the biggest client, but when you are probably the biggest advertiser in the world, vendors and new tech companies and just opportunities in general, they come to you. People are beating on your door. So there is no shortage of opportunities to be educated.
Yeah. And I got to see alphas and betas as the director at Zenith, but the amount of things that you got exposure to, being able to also see globally, like, that was one of the things that P&G was really good at, is having that global view. And they're still very good at that, right? They're good at bringing things into markets that make sense, and introducing new, and their leaders are leaders of the industry, right? Like Mark Pritchard, everybody knows his name. If you don't know Mark Pritchard, then you're not in advertising, right?
I know Mark Pritchard. Yep. Not personally, but
Exactly.
yeah, I've heard the
No,
name,
okay.
definitely.
I don't know him personally either, but I definitely know the things he's done, and the things he's talking about matter, and they still matter to, Scotiabank now. We go to the ANA conferences and we hear him talk, and our CMO talks to him, and it's really important that what they're saying we're listening to, because they do have a huge hold on the marketing industry and the advertising industry.
At Zenith, you managed a portfolio of many different clients, but at MediaCom, P&G's got many different brands under one client umbrella. How did that differ, managing clients, managing the different brands at P&G versus managing the many different clients you had at, say, Zenith?
The only difference was that it was one client still. I only had one kind of main client that I worked with, because it was the media side, and then there were brand managers, but we had a media contact. Whereas when I was at Zenith, there were many different clients, because there were so many different people and so many different clients to cater to. So it was actually a little bit easier because I knew what that person wanted. And so I didn't have to kind of cater to different people. But when you're managing a whole bunch of clients, you've got to cater to different kinds of people, and what their needs are versus having that one person that you answer to.
And I got to imagine that P&G is a well-oiled machine.
Oh,
Like,
gosh.
there are a lot of like policies and procedures and steps you have to follow when working with them or even executing a campaign versus maybe some of the other clients you had at Zenith who were like, okay, Gah-Yee, we're turning to you for direction. Was that the
Yeah,
case?
there were binders full of process when I showed up. So yes, but one of my, I'm going to call it a strength, is that I don't really care as much about that kind of stuff. Like, I just want to, and I say this a lot right now, I'm a bit of a bull in the china shop, where I'm like, I need to get this done. So we're going to do whatever we need to do, but we're going to get here, and we're probably going to get here real fast, and I'm going to break a lot of stuff. And so, I probably broke some of that process, but it was in the spirit of, getting something done. And so, yeah, there was a lot of process, and a lot of things were mapped out, but they also had flexibility, and that's what I appreciated. Like, I was allowed to break things, and it was okay.
One thing that I've learned about working with P&G throughout the years in a number of different capacities is that they've always got a budget to spend. So if you've got a proactive idea, they're one of the few clients worth taking it to because they might actually buy it if it works for them. Whereas other clients will be like, oh, this looks nice. Maybe next year we're spent for the
Yeah,
year.
it's true. They have test budgets, and they set money aside, and their whole ethos is that they're a collection of brands, right? And so really their work is to make those brands bigger. And so, if anything, P&G, I would argue, is a marketing organization. It's a marketing led organization.
That's an interesting way of putting it. From there, you were promoted to Director of Digital Strategy at MediaCom. How did that role differ from your time at P&G? Because correct me if I'm wrong, when you received that promotion, you moved away from the P&G business and onto different things at the agency.
I did. It was a move to working with other clients. Now, we had lost P&G by that point. We had pitched them twice, so like, everyone was kind of over it. It was that time, and I think a lot of people remember it. There were so many pitches going on, and so I moved to the digital strategy side to both help with pitching and also to work with the clients that we already had. So there was a strategy division that was very much talking to our clients about high level what's going on in the world, and how do we strategize around those, around what's happening in the industry. And again, never had a digital strategist before, and I kind of just made the role my own. I ended up working a lot with clients like Wrigley's, Mars, and that business, and taking them down that journey of becoming more digital, looking at programmatic advertising, and seeing what goals that they could accomplish using programmatic. And so I became kind of a consultant, for a lot of these clients that we had, and that was a lot of fun. But I did end up stepping away from the actual media buying and planning part of it. So it was more about road showing, and doing decks and pitching and that kind of thing.
Part of your role at MediaCom was liaising with the other offices, not only Canada, but across the globe. Was there anything that you learned from your counterparts in, say, the regions or in other countries?
I worked really closely with the team in New York, and it was the first time I really got to see, gosh, like big agency, pitches and that kind of thing. And so that really taught me a lot of, well, not a lot of, but more stage presence, right? And, I had done all of the theatrical things in high school. And so it was a good use of that kind of going back to pitching and talking about, what the agency was good at and what we've done before. So I learned a lot about pitching then and a lot about, I don't want to say sales, but sales.
Wait a minute. Did you just say that you enjoyed the dark side a little bit?
I I did, but I actually also left MediaCom because I was tired of pitching in sales.
God.
I enjoyed it a little, and I also don't like it so much. I escaped to the client side because I was tired of pitching. So that was one of the reasons.
Well, what brought you to Scotiabank? We already know that you didn't find the role, that the role found you, but what was the attraction to, working for one of Canada's biggest financial institutions?
So again, headhunter came looking for me, and this time it was a lot. I wish I remembered his name, but he reminded me of my grandfather, and he was a headhunter, and he would take me for coffee, and we would just chat and talk about marketing and digital and what it was like on the client side. And so he was the one who convinced me to come to Scotiabank and meet with their digital director. They were just setting it up again. They were setting up the practice in house. This was before the digital factory, which is one of the things that Scotiabank is known for. And it was again the opportunity to trailblaze and create my own team and decide what digital looked like as the future of Scotiabank. Whether it was working with our media agency or advising on what the website would look like or digital campaigns and how it was all things that I'd been like, I'd really love to work on that if I was on the client side. I really had never thought that I was going to go client side though. So it took a lot of convincing. It took grandpa a lot of convincing to like we had coffee several times for him to convince me to meet with the folks at Scotiabank and start that transition process and make that move because gosh, I wanted to be, and I mentioned her before, I wanted to be Sunny Boot. I wanted to be the president of a media agency and I wanted to wear big jangly uh, bracelets and go walk into a room and say something brilliant and then walk out and be like everybody be like wow, that's what I wanted. And so that's not the destiny on the client side, but I took a long time to get to the client side and get myself to psych myself up to going to client side.
In retrospect, though, you were ahead of the curve because I know Scotiabank was one of the first ones to really start taking their media in-house, but you could talk about a number of other clients, or I shouldn't say clients, brands or advertisers in Canada and even globally who are starting to do that as well or have already done that. So you're well ahead.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of my friends on the media side have gone client side, and it's just the way the world is moving, right? So a lot of digital is going in house now. I'm gonna say that things that are happening could change that. It could make the in-house team obsolete, especially on the digital side. If some of the players out there decide to eliminate the cookies, that could pose a huge problem. But we'll see. Anyways, that's a whole other podcast, Victor. If we
Okay.
start talking about that stuff.
A lot of people listening to this will know Scotiabank as a Canadian company, but I don't think many people are aware just what kind of international presence the company has, especially in the Caribbean and Latin America. Do you get to touch on some of those campaigns, get to learn from your peers that work in warmer, sunnier climates with far less snow? And if so, like, is there any real difference between, say, advertising say, a consumer bank in pick a Caribbean country. The Cayman Islands versus, say, Canada.
Well, banking in the Cayman Islands is a whole other thing, right?
Actually, you know what? I probably picked the wrong country.
Yeah.
That's like Switzerland South.
Exactly. Let's say Trinidad and Tobago, because we've got a big presence there. But yeah, you know what's really awesome is that Scotiabank has almost as long of a history in the Caribbean region specifically as it does in Nova Scotia. And you want to know why?
That's interesting. Yeah, no, why?
Because we were helping with we'll call it the rum trade during times when they were not necessarily supposed to be trading rum. So Scotiabank has been in the Caribbean. Well, that's where you get screech from, right? So in Eastern Canada, screech is a big thing, and that's because it's basically rum and it came from the Caribbean. So there's a tie to the Caribbean.
So wait, I didn't even know this. I'm learning something right here. There is like an Atlantic Canada version of rum called Screech?
Screech. It's called Screech. I've never tried it, but this is what I'm told. Our history in the Caribbean is tied to the rum trade. And it's because Eastern Canada has a history of Screech. Maybe one day we should go try some Screech. We should have when we can actually see each other in real life, we should go and try some Screech somewhere.
I'm up for that. Although, could we just call it Canadian rum? It's just, I don't know, hearing the name Screech. Yeah, we're going to do shots of Screech. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like some sort of crazy designer drug cooked up in someone's basement.
Or Saved by the Bell character. That's your.
Yes. Dustin Diamond, rest in peace.
I know. Yeah, that was my. That also ages me as well. So.
I watched all of it. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's Scotiabank has a very rich history in the Caribbean and Latin America, and so especially in the Caribbean, we have such high brand recognition there. It's really awesome. People tell me from the Caribbean, they're like, "Oh, we didn't even know that it was a Canadian bank because you guys have been here for so long," and it's because we've been trading with the region for so long. But I really love that we are a global organization. Scotia is, and we have that presence in so many of Latin American countries, and we bring a very Canadian approach to that, which I think is unique. Having worked with P&G, the largest, one of the largest global advertisers, it was very much a things came from the center and you kind of adapted or you did whatever. The philosophy that we have, and this is thanks to our CMO, she's global as well. She's an awesome woman. Her philosophy very much is, we let the countries do as they need to and see fit, because only they know their countries. They know their countries better than we do, right? So trying to force fit something from the center, from Canada, to make it, and make these countries do the same thing to lift and shift doesn't make sense. And so it's very much a collaborative and consultative approach. And we work very closely with them. And I've had the privilege of going there. I've been to Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, all these places on business travel, which is awesome and terrible all at the same time. But being able to go and see these countries and the culture, you learn really quickly that they're not Canadian. And so you can't treat them the same way. And so, our marketing philosophy is very much one of, listen, the brand is going to look the same wherever you go, right? Like the Scotiabank, the red, the flying S, the word mark, those things are going to be the same. That's the same experience you get everywhere. But the way that the brand is treated is very much up to the local teams. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
I've interviewed many guests on the Media People podcast, and a lot of the people I've interviewed have had many jobs at many places, and a lot of their promotions have kind of come up because, they were headhunted or they found a new opportunity at another company, and that's where they made sort of the forward or upward move in their career. You have worked at very few places, but at every place you've worked at, you have managed at least one promotion. So if anyone is listening to this and they want to find a way to get out of, say, the cubicle into the corner office, or I guess the small cubicle into the bigger cubicle, because we're all going to be hoteling when we get back, what advice would you impart to people?
When I was young, my parents always told me to stick with a job and not bounce around, and I guess that's kind of stuck with me. I find a hole and I fill it. That's the thing. I tell this to students when I go and talk at schools. I have this one graphic where it's a picture of, or it's an illustration of someone digging a hole and or filling the hole, I should say. And so what I've done in pretty much my entire career is found that thing that nobody else is doing, but someone's got to do it, and really gotten very passionate about it because I care a lot and filled that void. And so, back to when I started at Zenith, no one was a traffic coordinator before that on the digital side. They had traffickers. They were all television traffickers. I had no idea. They also had no idea what a big box was. So it was really, that was how I got my in, was finding something that no one else was doing and then doing it. It's how I went from an account executive to a director at Zenith, because I no one was building a digital buying team. There was no digital buying team. So I hired probably like 9 people, and I still am very close with them. Like I still see the team, a lot of people on the team often as we can. We catch up on Zoom or whatever. And we've even had weddings. There's been a couple that was married because of this team. So I think you've got to just find that hole, find that niche, and fill it. I'm still doing that here at Scotiabank. I There was nobody really managing, merchandising strategy, and there was a person kind of doing it, and she was seconded to it. But they were like, our executives were like, we need someone this is their full time job. They need a director, and we need to, and so they kind of looked around. They're like, Gah-Yee, she's got her hand up. Let's give it to her. And so that's kind of how it was. That's how I've moved around in my career and gotten into new roles. I collect things. My team right now is a bit, that there are disparate functions, but they all make sense together because I'm bringing them together, and we're filling that need to have account representation, to have media people. And so it's been fun because I get to create a lot from scratch.
You're also a regular on the lecture circuit. Who are you typically speaking to, and what do your talks involve?
I usually talk to undergrads. They're usually college. I'm on the board of directors for the professional advertising council. Oh, I butchered that, but they'll know who I'm talking about at Sheridan College, and they're a wonderful group, and so I talk to their students a lot. I usually give them a talk about how to get into the industry and the things that they should be. So I talk about filling the holes, and what they need to know and talk about to sound really smart when they go to interviews. But actually, this past week, I spoke to a Sheridan post grad class, and I had a fireside chat with my super inspiring, awesome colleague, Lisa Frickle, who is our sponsorship director, and she heads up our hockey sponsorship. So, like, if you see the name on the side of that big arena downtown Toronto, she had her hands in that one. She's such an inspiration and such an interesting person because she's really fought her way up in a very male dominated industry, and she is very highly regarded. But so I had an amazing chat with her, and that's the thing I love doing is talking to students, but also sharing. And so I was able to share with her her experiences and also my experiences, and that's the thing I find the students really want. They just want to know that you can get in, that they can find a career that they love and do things that they love, but they also want to hear about the things that are like, okay, so you're going to have to do this crappy thing for a little while, like BCRs and invoices and stuff. And then, but you're also going to do really awesome things like putting your brand on an arena, or sponsoring, hockey, or, for me, doing some pretty awesome campaigns and working on some pretty big deals for the bank. So That's what they want to hear, and that's what the students now, they want to know, that they can make it and they can get there, but also that you started somewhere too.
Send them this podcast then after we're done. So if they're just like, Gah-Yee, we want to learn more about you, just be like, forward button. Find this on Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts. And I
Oh,
got
I
to say,
love it.
you bring up something really interesting. Scotiabank Arena, the naming rights, man, you guys picked the perfect time. Like Air Canada had the naming rights for how many years, and there was no Stanley Cup or NBA championship. And then you guys come in, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first year it was called Scotiabank Arena was when the Raptors won, right? Like the
Yeah.
2018 to 2019 season.
Yeah, that's right. And that
Oh,
was amazing. Like, the earned media on that one was through the roof. So it did really well for Tangerine. And I'm sure they're pretty happy about it.
and there's a little bit of devil in the detail with that as well. Someone pointed this out to me that the day it was renamed from Air Canada Centre to Scotiabank Arena, he happened to notice that one of his older Instagram posts where he tagged himself at being the Air Canada Centre flipped to Scotiabank Arena that day. Like it was
Yep.
like I was like, oh my God, they've thought of everything. Like they right down to the social posts they own as well. I mean, good on
Yeah.
you. I think it's wonderful that you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it took us a really long time to, and listen, I wasn't really part of that. I'm going to give that credit to Lisa and our sponsorship teams and our agencies that they worked with. But, it took them, they did a lot of exercises to get the brand where it was supposed to make sure that people accepted it, right? Because there was a lot of fear. Like, everyone was calling it the ACC. Nobody calls it the ACC anymore. I honestly don't hear people call it the ACC. Like, everyone calls it the Scotiabank Arena. So, there was a lot of work done there to get that, in line, and it worked, I think.
I mean, stadium sponsorship does work. When was the last time you found yourself referring to it as the Sky Dome?
Okay, that's a bad one to ask me, because I do always
Okay.
refer to it as the Sky Dome. I'm terrible. I used to live across the street from there, and I remember going there as a kid. So this is the thing, right? The ACC hadn't been around as long as the Sky Dome. I remember going to the Sky Dome as a kid, and so I will always call it the Sky Dome. I'm sorry, Rogers, but I will always call it the Sky Dome because I remember going there as a kid, and I remember sitting up in the rafters and watching the dome open, and just the awe that seeing this huge monstrous thing happen. So that was not the greatest example for me. Sorry.
Oh, I'm trying to think of another one, but I can't because Maple Leaf
Yeah.
Gardens was just Maple Leaf Gardens always. No one had the naming rights to that.
No, no, no. It's a, you know what? Naming rights are, I think, fairly recent, right?
I believe so.
Yeah,
Guy, I'm really enjoying our chat. Time to move on to some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
So the very first one, the campaign you are most proud of.
So, not a campaign. It is actually a project I'm working on right now. It's our framework for inclusion in marketing, for diversity and inclusion. And it really feels like the most meaningful thing I'm doing in my career. It means so much to me personally. And it's going to make a difference in the work that we're doing. So, not a campaign, but every campaign from now on.
You don't have a favorite movie, but you have a favorite TV show. What is it?
I do. And it's actually, my university professor made us watch this show, and I fell in love with it. It is The West Wing. And I probably watch it once every couple of years, like from season 1 to season 7, right through.
I mean, the way it humanizes politicians from both sides of
Yeah.
the American aisle, it almost seems like science fiction now.
Right? No, but I feel like maybe President Bartlett is President Biden now. Like, there's a little glimmer of hope there versus not before.
See, I really liked, I think it was the final season when it was an election year and President Bartlett was out, because I watched the show sporadically. My brother's a big Politico, so I kind of
Mm.
caught it from him a bit. And I really enjoyed the last season, right down to, do you remember the live? This is a real media case study for people like you and me. Do you remember? Of course you do. What am I saying? The debate episode that they filmed live,
Yes.
and it had one sponsor, I think, in the middle. It was American Express. Not that I'm saying I'm a conservative or anything, but I don't know. Alan Alda won me over. I would have voted for him.
Yes, Alan Alda was and I did not like MASH because my dad watched it all the time, and then I could never watch TV. So I didn't like MASH, but I loved him on West. Every conservative on the show I loved, even if it was because I loved to hate them. You don't get that. That's not the real politics. That's the problem. If they were like that, it would be a lot harder for me.
They do a good job of humanizing them and presenting their point of view.
Yeah, exactly.
Your favorite video game?
Well, I'm playing right now. I've been playing Animal Crossing, as everybody does during the pandemic. So that is I played it pretty much every single day for an entire year. So it's pretty amazing because I usually only play games for I play them and then I stop playing them. My partner, he plays video games over and over again. I can't. But I'm also, that being said, I am also replaying Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So it's probably the only video game I've really replayed. But yeah, so those are my two favorite games right now.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
That is a very tough one because there's not a lot of representation of Asian women in Hollywood, right? So I had to think about this one. I think I would say Awkwafina. She's hilarious and loud, and just says what comes to her mind. So I'm like, that's me. I could do that. She could be me.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I am thinking and I have no idea. The only word that comes to mind is chaos, and that's probably not the right.
In capitals with an exclamation mark?
Yeah, underline, italicized, just chaos. And it's because everything is chaotic until it's not, and everything kind of is all over the place until it's not. But things also fall into place. So I don't know what the aftermath of chaos is, but it could be chaos and order.
Possibly.
I'm not a copywriter.
Order will be the sequel.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I like that. There we go.
Your favorite book?
Oh, a classic, Great Gatsby. And I don't read very often now. I listen to books on tape. I found that I'm a audio learner, and also the reason why I love podcasts, because I'm an audio learner, and so I listen to The Great Gatsby again. I don't replay video games, but I definitely reread books, and so The Great Gatsby is that one.
Your favorite song?
Okay.
How about this? I have other people struggle with this one as well. What do you believe is the most played song on, say, your Spotify or Apple Music playlist right now?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. That I can answer. It's probably Chris Stapleton's Traveler. I never used to listen to country music, and I just never listened to country music until I met my partner, and he's a huge country music guy, and he loves music. And I was stressing over this because if I said the wrong thing, he would be like, "Why did you choose that song?" So, but Chris Stapleton's Traveler is probably the most played song on my Spotify list.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
The drama will pass. The drama always passes.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
I'd probably be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid, and my aunt is actually a lawyer, and I was like, I'm going to be like my aunt. She's a lawyer. So I almost wrote my LSAT, but I didn't quite make it. And so I probably would be a lawyer. I like to argue with people.
Gah-Yee, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Victor.
That's it for today's show. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram @VicGenova.